week, and this is a very, very powerful work that we have in front of us, so I think it'll be a great spur to conversation. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau is one of the most decisive figures in the history of the modern world. He was the principal philosophical inspiration for the French Revolution, and from his multifaceted and somewhat inconsistent thought, you can trace the lineage of Marxists and hippies and a wide variety of ideological positions. He was born in 1712 and he lived until 1778. He was born in the Calvinist Republic of Geneva in Switzerland. His mother died soon after giving birth to him, and that would have an important effect on his psychology. His father was a watchmaker of romantic bent. Rousseau was not formally educated, though he grew up surrounded by a large library, and that always matters to have books around one. At the age of 15, he was introduced to a Swiss baroness, the Madame de Warren, who was 29 at the time. Within a few years, she would become a lover of Rousseau, and all during that time, she was superintending his education. She had become a Catholic and was a fervent Catholic evangelist, as it were, and in the intellectual circle that she attracted from those minds, Rousseau gained a very good education. Rousseau also gained from her a religious fervor that would mark him for the rest of his life and would set him apart from the other leading exponents of the Enlightenment. Eventually, he would marry a woman named Thérèse Levasseur, and they would have 5 children. Unfortunately, Rousseau abandoned those children and turned to a public orphanage, which was not a good fate for those children. He was a composer and musicologist. He was probably known more as that than anything else during his life. Well, at least till the great political works came out. His emergence into the public mind was signaled by his essay in response to the question posed by the Academy of Dijon, whether the progress of the sciences and of letters has tended to corrupt or to elevate morals. He won that prize competition. It was an essay competition. And this was a work, the first discourse on the arts and sciences was published in 1750. In that work, he takes the very contrarian position in this age of enlightenment, this age of philosophy as changing everything, as making available to humanity the great fruits of the scientific revolution, this belief in progress, which was new, a novum in the history of thought, that tomorrow is going to be better than today, as rationality and science and philosophy advance. And Rousseau answering this question, which the assumption is the answer is going to be yes, whether it's going to be that, yes, it's a good thing that we have arts and sciences progressing. That must be good for morals. But in fact, he answers with a very strong no, that in fact, our morality has been completely compromised by progress in science and the arts. He argues that basically the primitive human being was far healthier than the modern human being, was able to do things, had a capacity for self-realization and providing for his or her own needs that the modern man does not. We in fact have lost the ability to stand on our own 2 feet, and that even and most importantly goes to the level of our own sense of self. Here, as a moralist, Rousseau innovates, and aside from the very strong French moralistic tradition about pride, which is correlated to their term, to the French term amour propre, which is this sense of selfishness. Rousseau wants to say that there's another way of relating to oneself, and that's amour de soi, the love of self, and that doesn't have to be, that isn't vicious. So this tradition that includes La Rochefoucauld and Pascal, this sense that our selfishness is going to need a check. Rousseau is going to point to another way of relating to oneself, where we don't have to look and gain our self-worth from the eyes of other people. So his thought was, once we started to congregate in his thought experiment of primitive man, once we started to live close to each other, and so he posits a more atomistic primitive state, and then he says when we started to congregate, then we started to show off, and those with more talent would draw envy, and those and would themselves feel pride. And then we're off to this arms race of status seeking. And so he goes on to refine, given all the criticisms of his position, he goes on to refine this hypothesis in his second discourse on inequality of 1755. And there he adds into the genealogy of our moral degradation, the invention, or as he calls it, private property. So this is a very much a different theory than John Locke's. The discourse begins with that great statement, man was born free, but everywhere he is in chains. So he puts a lot of pressure on the vicious effects of private property, and how inequality based on the hoarding of property has made it very difficult for the modern human being to have a proper relation to self. In the mid 1750s, he breaks with his fellow philosophe, the encyclopedist. He had been very close with Diderot. He had repaired to a rural estate a few miles north of Paris, the Hermitage, and he calls this move the great revolution of his life. In an age of insistent sociability, he was becoming the solitary walker. And he would break with Diderot, he would break with Voltaire. This seems to be a mark of a narcissist, because he tended to lose his friendships. He wrote his great works there, or after this break with the philosophe. Emile and the Social Contract both come out in 1762. The Social Contract is a very important piece of political philosophy, and it was the work that in particular inspired the French Revolution. There he makes the paradoxical, let us say, claim that a human being might have to be forced to be free. He posits a notion of a general will so his political theory is that, and this is in distinction to both Hobbes and Locke, we surrender our rights to the community, and then we are beholden to the community as a whole. That's different from Hobbes, where we surrender all of our rights to a sovereign, a subset, or a singular individual of the community. And it's different from Locke, who says we only surrender some of our rights, and of course we retain private property. For Rousseau, the notion is that if we're going to reestablish under conditions of modernity the conditions of primitive vitality, he wasn't actually suggesting we go back to an age of primitive atomism. He was saying, so what do we do in the modern world? Well, his notion is we need to understand that sovereignty really belongs to the people, and that the government that should be formed in a regime that is in touch with reality will simply serve the general will. That is the thought that each individual has given up his or her rights as individuals, so that to the whole community, that is all of them as a body, and the government would then execute those that will, would carry it out. The will itself, the people as a whole, would be the sovereign. In fact, he advocated for direct democracy, and so the government would be there simply to carry out what the people as a whole legislate. It's not a simple majoritarianism, though it's hard to see how you avoid the majoritarian, that is when it's simply a majority that decides on a thing, which in theory, that's not supposed to, you're not supposed to be able to read the general will off of simply the aggregation of individual preferences and some subset of them. It should be something that's intelligible as such. In the other work, of 1762, the work that we have before us, Emile, it's interesting because he's doing a different thing than in the social contract, because the program of education, it's a massive book describing how to raise a child well. It's kind of a program in some ways of unschooling, in other ways not. But it's not a program of civic or public education. It's a program that would lead to the creation of the solitary individual, like Rousseau, capable of enjoying the sentiment of existence. He rejects in this work mediation. Well, he rejects in general. He certainly rejects mediation, as we see in this profession of faith. He rejects the mediation of revealed religion. That is, that gets in the way of the individual and God's direct, unmediated intimacy. And in the social contract, basically, he's saying no current government should stand between the people and its own sovereignty. The only legitimate government is one that would be an instrument of the people's own sovereignty. These positions as a whole had a huge effect on Immanuel Kant, and we'll see some of that indicated in next week's reading. The particular excerpt we have is from, let's see, I forget which book now, but it's The Profession of Faith of the Savoyard Vicar, and I think it's book 4. And it has two main parts. If you've got to read through, it is, of course, by far the longest selection this semester, and I think probably in the whole cycle. It has two major parts. One is against the materialists, especially Locke and Helvetius. He's explicitly fighting with Locke and his notion that matter could possibly, by the power of God, have the power to think. And he's opposing Helvetius, who was another, who as a straight up materialist was claiming that there is nothing in a radical empiricist, there's nothing beyond sensation. Judgment itself is nothing but sensibility. And of course, in this work, Rousseau is maintaining the integrity of judgment as an active contribution on the part of the individual to the knowing process. And of course, that would have great effect on the Kant's notion of transcendental subjectivity. There are 3 articles of faith that we get provided in the first half of the profession of faith. One, that the matter, because it's not capable of moving itself, must be moved by a self-moving will. 2, matter moves according to laws of motion, indicating an intelligent will. And 3, we are free, and therefore all evil is the result of our misuse of freedom. So he's defending, as Kant will do, trying to maintain in a world where the empiricists were carrying the day. He's trying to prove the existence of God, freedom, and indeed the immortality of the soul. The second half turns from a critique of materialist philosophy to a critique of revealed religion, especially Catholicism. His position is Socinian, it's Unitarian, it's a passionate deism. So that's not different from Voltaire, for instance, in the deism part, but it is different in the sense that Rousseau is a very, very zealous deist. And in the second half, he launches a very profound, I think at times, and I speak as a committed Catholic, I think it's a very profound challenge to revealed religion. And that's something for those of us who are believers to take seriously, is has he done something that might be useful for our own faith? So we have now the 4 questions before us. In the Savoyard Vicar's Profession of Faith, Rousseau wishes to chart a path between materialist philosophy and dogmatic theology, employing a modified skepticism to safeguard God, freedom, and immortality on the one hand, and tolerance on the other. Is his system any less assertive than the ones he critiques? That's going to be one of the obvious objections, because the vicar is very, well, you know how it starts. He's lost his position in the world because of a scandal. He's in a dark night, and he finds himself in this morass of Cartesian doubt. And so he's trying to figure out how to get out of it. And he looks to philosophical systems first, and they don't help, because all of those philosophers are committed to the rage for singularity, to stand out with their system, as opposed to a commitment to the truth. And the question is, well, don't we have another system in front of us here? Number 2, what role does sentiment play in attaining to Rousseau's natural religion? How does sentiment relate to reason? Number 3, what does a happy life look like when lived according to this profession of faith? In arguing the reasonableness of the dogmas of Trinity and Incarnation, does a Christian envisage a life much different from what Rousseau would endorse? And number 4, Rousseau forcefully presses against the logic of damnation. Is it possible for Christians to benefit from this critique to regain a sense of proportion in a religion devoted to universal charity?